Welcome to the video podcast of Silicon and Spice, where tech leaders share life's unique flavors. And today we're very lucky to have Joana here. Hi.
Hi.
Joana currently is the head of developer relations at Google DeepMind. She's also a content creator, which we have in common. You have really good following on Twitter or X, Instagram, as well as LinkedIn. So my first question is, what is your path into developer relations?
That's a great question. And I don't have a linear answer for you, as you might have been expected already. This is really cool that we're finally doing the podcast together. It's been a long time coming, that's for sure.
Definitely.
My path into the developer relations was not a traditional path. So I studied pharmaceutical sciences. I was a research scientist at the beginning of my career. I did my master's in drug development, compounding.
I did not know that. That's really cool. Okay.
And so it's very different from a traditional path that you probably see in tech companies. No. So I started my career as a pharmaceutical scientist, and then I moved into public health. So I worked for the United Nations, for the International Pharmaceutical Federation for like 5 years in The Hague. Okay. And I used to work with governments from all around the world on bringing new services, new pharmaceutical services into market. I used to work with universities on developing the curricula for new master programs, new PhDs. So very different from what I do nowadays. And during that time, I used to travel a lot. So because I was almost like a consultant on public health and education, I used to go to all these different countries advising policymakers and educational leaders on how to create these strategies for workforce development and public health. So I think I traveled to like 47 countries around that time. That was super cool. But then I felt like I didn't have enough business skills to actually see the applications of the policies. And I went back to business school. I started my MBA at IE Business School. I did summer semester here in Berkeley. And then it was after the MBA that I started thinking, okay, I want to do something new.
Something different,
Something different.
Yeah.
And you know, when you finish your MBA out of business school, you typically go into consulting, and that's exactly what I did. So I went into consulting for a year already here in the United States. I did digital transformation. I worked with many VCs, with many startups here in the Valley. And then finally, there was an opportunity to go to Google. And at the time, AI, machine learning were these very niche things. It wasn't, as widespread as it is nowadays. And they were like, okay, you understand how the brain works. Would you be interested in this field called machine learning and artificial intelligence? And I was like, yeah. That's quite interesting.
Right.
So that's what led me to Google and to developer relations. I was used to build and work with communities of experts, high-level policymakers, different types of stakeholders, and very high-level players in the field of pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences. And then all of that translated into working with researchers and developer communities quite nicely. And so that's how I got into developer relations. Basically, from there, you learn a lot on the job. Like your day-to-day, you have to build things, you have to test things, you have to iterate on all these technologies and tools. And so it's a very fast-paced environment. Literally, that's what attracted me to it as well. I was meeting with people, the education side of it, the showing how to. So that's what got me into developer relations.
I love that. So you have a science background. Through your MBA, you kind of started to explore a different career path. Yeah. And I love that you have the common background. You learning about people. Now you're learning about machines. Yes. And then there are community building flavor out of it. It's just you used to work with governments or universities. Now it's like focused on developers with developer communities. Yeah. So I think that made sense, even though it's not a linear path, but the transition, actually every step you took, it makes perfect sense now, look at it retroactively.
Yes, and developer relations is a deeply technical field. And so translating that deep technical knowledge that I had from a different field to a new field is just really exciting to see the parallels between both fields and how I can apply the scientific mindset now into developer relations. Yeah. Now within my role at DeepMind, it becomes even more important on how to reach out to researchers and developers and builders, because everyone is now able to build with AI.
Right,
and so
that's true.
This pretty cool to see how the skill set translates across different fields.
Yeah, definitely. Which is a great segue to my second question,
Okay.
which is you've been at Google for about 6.5 years, and now you're head of developer relations of Google DeepMind. How has the role evolved for you over the last 6, 7 years? I imagine when you first got the job, it's not what it looks like, right? So
It's very different.
changing a lot, yeah.
Yeah, it's very different. I started at the TensorFlow developer relations.
Oh, TensorFlow, okay, yeah.
So,
yeah.
and then I kept progressing, and now I lead the developer relations team over at Google DeepMind. So many things have changed, right? So the landscape in AI, the market has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
And one thing that changed for me personally within my role was the product portfolio of what we covered. So if we were very focused on frameworks, very focused on TensorFlow, it expanded so much over the last couple of years. So now we cover Gemini, Gemma open models, robotics, Gen Media, and the platform of choice for my team is Google AI Studio, which is a prototyping environment that allows anyone to actually build with our models. It's a fantastic tool for not just developers, but for builders as well. And so one thing that's changed dramatically is the product portfolio. Like the breadth of the work is very different from what it used to be. Another one is the pace of development.
The pace,
is very, very different.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the market shifts, and now there's so many different players in the market. There are so many companies trying to bring AI solutions into the market, and so we have to stay competitive, and we have to stay agile, and the teams have to be flexible enough to adjust and keep building and innovating to really respond to the market trends and what users need. So that has changed dramatically as well over the past years. And then I sometimes say that the only constant is change.
It's change,
Especially in AI. I think that's very true.
Yeah.
Because what we know and the capabilities and what able to build today, it may change in 2 weeks.
Every day it's different. Yeah, that's
we
true.
honestly don't know. We're building a new industry, which is super exciting and scary at the same time, because what are the boundaries? What are the limits? Or should we keep pushing for it? What are the implications for even the human race? These are like fundamental questions that we have to think about every single day now that we didn't think about. I'm probably not on a single day basis previously. Yeah. So product portfolio, fast paced, market shifts and market pressure. I think those are the things that have changed quite dramatically for us in developer relations.
Yeah, that's a really good summary. I think Kevin Weil, the CPO of OpenAI, he mentioned in Lenny's podcast recently is that the model we have today is the worst of whatever we're going to have in the future, right? There's always going to be something that will keep progressing. So there's always developments you mentioned, like really fast paced. Whatever we have today could be dramatically different, even a day or a week or a month.
Like every day we are creating a new baseline.
Right, that's true.
Every day you create a new baseline in terms of what are the model capabilities, what are we able to do. And sometimes the pace of development is influenced by the model in itself. The models, they need to learn and improve certain types of capabilities, and sometimes is the infrastructure that is not quite there. Many things that we have to consider when building these technologies. Obviously, in developer relations, we are a product adjacent organization. We are contributing, we are helping, we are influencing product roadmaps by bringing the voice of the users, the voice of developers, by bringing new ideas, new features, things that can be improved, streamlined. We are not necessarily building the products ourselves, but that proximity to the end user, I think it's what I like the most. And it's what it's really important for us to be able to win. Well, any company to be able to win is to build the tools and to build the models with the capabilities that users want.
Yeah, the voice of the customer part. Yeah. I think it's very important, like for any product person, you always want to listen to what your customer wants. You don't just find a problem of the solutions you have, right? That would not work. And then in this case, you have to be close to the developers who are the end users of the Gen AI studios, and you want to make sure their feedback is heard. That will translate into the DeepMind, like product roadmaps and stuff.
Yeah, into the product life cycle. So for example, new features that we may want to bring into AI Studio, for example, what are developers trying to do? Do they need a certain type of feature? Can we improve the UI so their experience is also better within the environment that we already provide? So there's always so many things
to do
that we can improve. Integration also with our Google products. So for example, something really cool we have in AI Studio that is a differentiator between other products in the market is the ability to paste YouTube links. So you can interact with the model based off a YouTube link that you just paste into the chat prompt. Another one is, models have a cutoff knowledge. And so being able to verify certain type of information with Google search is another capability that is really cool. And so Google has this entire ecosystem of features that we are able to build because we have the products in itself, which unlocks so many opportunities for people to build with, which is super, super awesome to see.
Yeah, you already have the family of apps that's touching billions of lives, right? So any feature you guys are releasing kind of really already have that foundation, the baseline to help a lot of people. So next question I have is something I'm curious, right? I'm a product person, so I'm always asking, what is a typical day, if you have one, as a tech leader in developer relations? And the follow-up question is, what do you think is the biggest challenge you are facing now in the Gen AI space?
Wow. Okay, that's a loaded.
It's a loaded question.
That's a loaded question. That's a loaded question, but it's a question that I actually love, because the reality, if I'm being completely honest, I don't have a typical day.
Right, every day is different. That's true.
Honestly, I don't have a typical day anymore. There are certain things that are non-negotiables within my day, which is some time to take care of myself, for example, some time for well-being. But other than that, my professional work day is just not typical. We can have a design meeting in the morning, and we know that this is the path. We've agreed on a strategy, and in the afternoon things have changed because
it's developing so
capabilities change because things change so rapidly. And so a typical day, let me give you close to a typical day. Does that work for you?
Yeah, sounds good.
Close to typical, I would say. Tons of check-ins with cross-functional teams.
Yeah, you have a lot of cross-functional part, right?
Developer relations sits at the intersection of product, engineering, research, marketing, UX, and support. So we are literally the connecting glue between all these different types of organizations, because we are responsible for doing all the inbound, outbound strategies for the company. And what I mean by that is we basically bring external feedback into the product roadmap. We help product managers prioritize user feedback and solve some of the things that we need to improve, some of the bugs. So we help with that type of prioritization, but also sometimes we help testing, and we become the customer zero for research teams.
So the beta users.
Exactly. So before we externalize things, we test them thoroughly in-house, and developer relations is that customer zero to almost like serve as a prototype for research teams. With engineering teams, we make sure that the developer experience is polished, that we have samples, that we have examples, tutorials that developers will find useful on how to implement our models into their workflows. And with marketing, how do we evangelize about the technology?
The GTM stuff,
right? How do we talk about it? What's the product positioning? What's the model positioning? What are the evals? How are we optimizing on our models, for example, for efficiency and price? What do developers say about that? And so, we are all these voices of inbound, outbound communication and voice of developer for Google and for our users. So it's a very cross-functional discipline, which I absolutely love. And it allows us to be involved with all these different parts of the product development life cycle. We don't necessarily build the product, but we have a huge impact on what is going to be built and how users use it as well. Because there's also the inspiration part of it. So people see, oh, this is a cool demo. Maybe I can do that too. Or I've seen this example to optimize my workflow. Okay, let me do it. And so it's a very This is a very long answer to say there's not a typical day, because things change all the time.
Yeah.
But one thing is for sure, the focus is always on the end user and improving the experience for the end user. So thinking about all these cross-functional partners that we work with, some days it's more focused on the development side of things, sometimes more on the GTM, more on the community building, and that's why it's a very dynamic space.
That definitely sounds very dynamic. Kind of, I'm thinking about as you said, one centralized touch point for everything, right? So if you have one dot, you have all these branches, right, going touch all these different partners. And what do you think is the challenge? Do you think keep everybody in sync is that challenge, or maybe it's going back to the fast pace you mentioned? Like if you do a design decision in the morning, boom, things are changing. Do you think that's a bigger challenge?
That's a challenge sometimes to keep everyone aligned and on the same page. And in terms of priorities as well, what's a priority for research might not be a priority for product, but might be a priority for the end user. So how do we advocate and help everyone be aligned within what's the stack rank of priorities? That can be a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, that's true.
And also sometimes the lack of data to make decisions. I mean, there's a lot of data, but how do we translate that data into insights that actually will allow us to say, you know, this is more of a priority than something else? And also because there's so many opportunities, a challenge is to lose focus. Because and especially with a team that has such a wide product portfolio, it can be really easy to go into a rabbit hole within one community, one product area, and lose focus of North Stars, business goals. And so, that's another challenge. What's the fair balance of these GTM strategies for the different products?
Yeah, so I think similar to product, you have to get ruthless prioritization because you have all these families of apps, which has millions of developers or even billions in the future of impact. So then how do you keep the prioritization in sync and then getting alignment, as you mentioned, with all these partners?
Exactly. And then another thing is for users, we have lots of escalations. Users, you know, sometimes they get errors and things are not working on their end. And people want to get in touch with us to give us feedback, good or bad. Also, how are we design the systems to be able to answer all these questions from the users to help them solve their problems in a scalable way? Right?
The Twitter complaint,
Twitter, Reddit, any type of social media. So how are we able to solve these problems for as many users as possible, knowing that sometimes is tough when it's in the public sphere as well?
Then Google also has its own brand, right? If one user or one community, they have the loudest voice, but you want to address their concerns, but you also don't want to lose sight on other communities. Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's like almost like a tug of war, right? You have to keep things balanced, right? Looking back, kind of what advice do you have for people who might want to consider developer relations or community building as a career path?
That's a fantastic question. Well, as you can see by my example, there's not a traditional path
to not
developer relations.
That's true.
Because developer relations can touch so many
surfaces
and surfaces within the company. So you can have people who are more focused on, more passionate about building demos and inspiring, you know, developers to build these really cool applications. There's people who are more focused on building great docs and focusing on the user experience. Then you have others more on the community management side of things, working on events, on hackathons, and so on, evangelizing about the technologies, being social media influencers as well. And so there's not one traditional profile for developer relations. So that's one. But one standard that I've seen that works for people who want to transition into developer relations, number one, they have a passion for education. They want to teach people how to do things, showcasing how to do demos, cool examples, leveraging technology. So they have a passion for education, communication. A second one, they have to have a very technical background. So you are able to have these discussions at a very high level with your cross-functional partners. And then the third one is also flexibility and travel. to meet with many people in the community, to be passionate about solving problems that sometimes it's the end user, sometimes it can be an internal client from a different organization. So I would say growth mindset, because like we said, change is the only constant.
Right, that's
so
true.
Growth mindset, a strong technical background, passion for education and communication, and creativity. Because like I said, we work with all these different cross-functional partners. And on GTM strategies, on inspiring developers of what they can do with the technology. So you have to be creative to create some cool demos.
That's true.
So we have some people on the team who are extremely creative, and it's really cool to see what they build.
I love that. It sounds like developer relations is like a melting pot, right?
Yes,
everybody
it really
has own specialization, and then put together, it's like one giant piece of the puzzle. Like as you said, some people, they really have to help with the demos or getting things streamlined, easy to understand, but then you need a technical foundation.
And like on our team, we have people, well, I have a background in pharmaceutical sciences. We have people with backgrounds in computer science, software engineering, data science, journalism. So all different types of fields and disciplines that culminated into developer relations. Everybody brings a different skill set and different perspective. And so it's really, really cool to see how all these people with different ideas come together to build cool stuff.
I love that. I think that it's especially amazing that people don't have to come from a certain profile, right? As long as you have a growth mindset, you have flexibility, and then you have a passion to like evangelizing products, I think you can make it work really well. Okay. Nice. Now we're going to kind of one of my favorite bonus question section. Since I worked for Stitch Fix, I actually got this blouse from Stitch Fix as well. What is your favorite clothing? You do have a lot of external facing customers, developers, like events.
I do. Okay. Only one?
It could be a few.
Okay, it could be a few. Fantastic. So for the different settings in which I operate for conferences, I love Valentino suits. There's nothing like a power suit. And I absolutely love Valentino. I think that's my favorite brand. Then Maj and Sandro are great brands, French brands that have very like office attire, very cool day-to-day outfits. I think those two are like my go-to.
Professional and elegant.
Professional, elegant, fun. So that's exactly what I'm wearing today. And then I like Zara. I'm European. I have to like the European brands. It's in my DNA. But I would say, those four brands is probably what I wear the most.
These are very good brands. Right. The last question is a spicy question. There are so many CEOs talking about, the 20-30% of the codes are going to be written by AI by the end of this year, or like Y Combinators, 80% of the codes are written by AI. You know, all these wild claims. So do you think there are concerns that potentially, in the world will need fewer developers? Thus, this developer relations role will also, I don't want to say diminish, but maybe the power will change, in the next 10 years when the AI is taking over writing code and stuff, and then, or maybe it will continuously evolve. Like, how do you feel about this path?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot of debate around it, that's for sure. So the software engineering role will evolve and will continue to evolve. It will not disappear, but it will change in the future, especially with AI and with coding tools becoming more and more accurate. So that will change for sure. The role of developer relations will change as well. Most jobs in most industries will change at some point with AI. So that's a given. When we introduced the calculator into math, things changed as well, but it didn't go away, making manual calculations. Things will change. The role of developer relations will probably evolve, so might be less focus on developers, might be more focus on builders, on students. We are seeing this advent of vibe coding, right? So everyone, the barrier to entry in AI is decreasing quite a lot with these prototyping tools, and AI Studio is a great example of that. So basically, with more and more people building applications, doing vibe coding and things like that, it will change the industry completely. So we don't even know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Developer relations will evolve. If it's not so much focused on advocating for the developer, it will be always advocating for the end user. And there's always an end user. That end user may shift and evolve, might be a builder, might be a professional in a different industry trying to leverage AI for some very specific applications. But advocating for the end user will not go away.
Yeah.
The day-to-day, how we think about technical content, blog posts, videos, yes, those strategies will obviously change. We'll have to identify what's the new social platform, how we're going to
evangelize,
right, to evangelize, how we're getting to our users, our developers, how are people consuming content, what's the format that they prefer. And so like all those strategies obviously will evolve. Also, the product portfolio will evolve in a way that we cannot anticipate right now, but there will always be an end user that has a pain point.
The one we solve. Yeah,
we will always want to solve that.
Yeah,
so that is not going away.
Yeah.
And the same thing with developer relations engineers, software engineers. The jobs will not go away. The day-to-day may change. They will also have more time to focus on really matters, to be also more creative with the demos, the applications that they build, because some of the tasks can be outsourced to AI. And so it will evolve. It will evolve.
Yeah, I love that idea because, as you said, with the vibe coding, whatever, to tech is a lot easier. So versus traditionally, maybe developer relations, you have a very specialized like developer documentation. Now your end user could be a 10-year-old who's writing prompts, starting to build an app, and their understanding of technology might not be as specialized as before. Correct. So how you educate, how you evangelize or build that relationship will be different than,
And you touched on a great point. You mentioned documentation. Will we need documentation in the future?
True. That's true.
Will we need documentation, or will the model
talk to each other?
Or with agents and workflows that are changing dramatically, do we need... We don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And so that's why I say we build the industry every single day, and all these cool things will change so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe in the future, I think, the kids who are learning to code, or I guess learning to use the code tools, maybe they prefer like a newer kind of social media to 10 seconds prompting and stuff. Yeah, that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And like I said at the beginning, the team also focuses on robotics, on gen media.
Yeah.
So all these creative communities
that
are consuming our models, and they're creating images and videos. It's just so cool to see how people are using these models. And on the robotic space as well, we're pushing the boundaries of what is able to we are able to do nowadays, and so it's really cool.
Yeah, I think Google probably has I don't want to say better chance, but probably better chance compared to other startups, because you have a team of powerful, smart, creative people that can prepare what's yet to come, versus maybe for a startup, they prepare a very singular focus, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes a startup, they have to go very deep into one solution. Google is able to make different bets.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that's probably what scale enables us to do. We also have the end-to-end ecosystem, also from GPUs and accelerated infrastructure to power all of this development, which we need quite a lot of compute power as well.
That's true.
And so I believe that like foundational models, we probably have the families we have nowadays are the families that we will have at least for a very long time. If I were to give advice to any startup founders, I would probably not go into a foundational model type of business nowadays, because we have the Gemini family, the GPT family, and it's hard to compete with these companies.
With the resource they have. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But there's so many other cool business applications that probably are overlooked by these companies because they are small.
Right,
that can become huge for a startup if they go really deep into that. So the market is exploding with ideas, and that's so awesome to see.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, these are all the questions I have. Thank you so much, Joana.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was so cool to chat to you.
Definitely. All right, bye.
Bye.